Dear Brambling, it's your Uncle Luke here. I hope you're having a great day today. I hope you're taking care of yourself in some way. I know today it is a very sunshiny day, and I got a day off, and I'm very excited about that. Today on the podcast, however, I have my friend Richard. Richard is a student psychologist, and his area of expertise is relationships. And today we are going to be talking about relationships, more specifically, however, friendships and mentor relationships, parent relationships. Yeah, it gets vulnerable, it gets kind of personal, and I'm very grateful for this conversation with him. For me, in this conversation, I do talk about my old childhood friends, and I find that it's very important for my story to talk about them candidly, and I do mention their names. Yeah, that's all I can really say. I'm really grateful for this conversation. We had it live in person, and yeah, Richard and I, we just talked for like almost 3 hours. It was such a great conversation. It bled into some archetypal language, it bled into emotions, and my word, it was just so good. And I just remember re-listening to this conversation, just sometimes forgetting to edit. Really, truly, I was just forgetting to edit, and I was just listening, and I was just enjoying personally. So I'm really excited to bring this conversation to you guys. It is going to be a two-parter because it is very long. And yeah, I do hope you enjoy. But yeah, other than that, I'm just gonna jump right into this conversation, and I hope you enjoy. I'll see you then. Hello.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good. This is the second time we're recording this, but it is probably like a half a year in between recordings.
Yes, I am a procrastinator, and I'm not very good with my hard drives, and I don't know, what did I do? I erased it somehow. I destroyed my hard drive.
Your hard drive just being plugged in all the time going, I'm here, I'm not here, I'm here, I'm not here.
That's exactly what happened.
Gets a little bit tired.
Yes. Well, hello, Richard.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Round 2.
Round 2.
Yes, but round 1 for everyone else.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So how have you been?
I've been good.
Yeah.
Should I maybe introduce myself?
Yes, please.
Okay, so my name's Richard. I know Luke because I went to his Starbucks and I was like, hey, a cute guy with Pokemon on his shirt. I better talk to him. And we've been friends ever since.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I am a grad student, and I'm learning to become a psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not yet a psychologist. I am not. If you're watching this for legal reasons, I am not your psychologist. I am not Luke's psychologist. We're just talking, and I'm probably going to bring some fun psychology things into our conversation. But yeah,
Counting on it.
yeah. But don't think I'm. And I'm also speaking as not a psychologist right now. So
Okay.
just take what I say with a grain of salt.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, thank you for that. That's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, so something I like to ask everyone before they begin, and I'm sure you're familiar with it,
Yeah.
but would you be down to tell a little bit about your story?
Oh, my story. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was. We're gonna get to the what's in your cup questions soon because I prepared for that and made Luke something pretty gross. So my story. I grew up in a small town in BC, and eventually moved out to the big city and did my university here. I started in sciences and then realized I just really liked talking to people, and I was good. I actually remember the first semester of first year in university everyone like does horrible on their first year or their first exams. So I remember I was just studying in the common room on our floor, and literally everyone came in and like lay down on the chair and like wanted to talk to somebody. So I was like, hi, maybe a good psychologist in the future. And
Yeah.
here I am now in my training. So yeah,
Wow.
yeah, that's kind of the short and sweet story. A lot more, but I'm sure we'll get to that with the topic today
Yeah.
of
Definitely.
journeys in some respect.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like you mentioned, what is in your cup?
What's in our cup? So
What's in
I decided to bring something a little spicy, a little bit interesting.
It is.
I made Luke a drink with rum and jalapeno kombucha. The jalapeno kombucha is quite nice.
Yes.
Not with rum, as we have found out.
I mean,
So
it's fine. It's a fine
it's
drink.
drinkable.
It is drinkable.
Barely. But, you know.
Well, like a little more than barely.
Yeah.
Like I'm actually reaching for it, being like, okay, another sip.
It's
Another
interesting.
sip. Yes.
It's got, like, you'd think that a jalapeno kombucha would have more going on, more funkiness, but it's just very subtle kombucha and mint and a little bit of spice at the end.
Yeah.
But,
That's nice. Yeah.
yeah. So, just a little bit fancy.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So
I guess
today is a little different than usual, and I think this one we're letting Richard kind of take the reins a little bit, or maybe we're gonna have like share the reins a little bit.
I think share the reins would be nice.
Okay.
So originally our topic was security
And trust.
And trust.
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, I really enjoyed talking about that. And I'm actually, my research that I do sexuality and relationship research, as well as I'm learning to become a psychologist, so I form relationships, not those types of relationships, but like supportive relationships with my clients. And so I decided like it may just be good to talk about relationships in general, because like, I don't know, I feel like that, my thoughts about it, I know some theories by like Sullivan. He created like the interpersonal psychological theory. One of the people, I forget her name. Another psychologist created another interpersonal theory, but I know his a bit more. So his idea was that in order to really create our personality, that really comes from the people around us and the interactions that we have with others. And so I thought it would be really interesting to talk about like important relationships, whether that be parental, friendships, romantic relationships, like things of that nature of our life. So
Yeah.
I think that's a good topic.
Definitely.
Lots to talk about with this. And a lot that like doesn't have to be psychologically focused, because we can just talk about important relationships in our lives with people and how they affected us. So
I guess maybe let's start off with the elephant in the room type of question. And how would you define a relationship?
I think like there's many different ways that you can define it. I think it's just like our interactions as human beings, and like we have many different interactions, and like it really depends on what you're trying to define as a relationship. Are you trying to define a romantic relationship? Just like I could say that you have a relationship with every customer that you had today.
Yes.
And like we somehow have weird relationships with people we don't even talk to. We just notice each other. So I guess like if you want to get really granular, it could just be like the interactions you have with every human in the world, whether or not you see them or not. But or you could really get to like, is it something more meaningful? What would you say you would count as a relationship?
Yeah, well, I think you're hitting the nail on the head with that. I do also think, however, I would add in a few more swings of the hammer, if you will, by saying, with everyone in the world and yourself, and with activities and maybe even objects, or
Sure.
like there's like people can have like a really bad relationship with substances,
Yeah, okay.
right?
I was thinking more of like an interpersonal relationship, but I do agree that it can be something like one big thing in attachment research is like attachment relationships with God, which is really interesting.
Yes.
So, like, yeah, I do think it can be like also more metaphysical. But yeah. So that's what I was thinking about. But yeah, again, we don't really have much planned, but
Yeah.
I thought a good place to start would be like what relationships I guess I want to explore for both of us what relationships have really impacted our lives and like kind of unpacking that together.
Totally. Wow. Okay.
And I mean, I guess we could start and maybe I'll direct the first question, like, was there any child relationships that you had that were really important for you as a child? Because one thing with Sullivan's interpersonal theory, he had a really big thing about how child relationships, your relationships with your peers in childhood, can be really helpful for you. He actually lived up in a pretty rough household. His mom, I think, was pretty absent. His father was too. And he was mainly raised by his grandmother, who was from Ireland, did not speak English, only spoke Gaelic.
Really?
So he could not communicate with her. And the way she communicated with him was by leaving dead spiders around the house where he was not supposed to go. So as you can see, this is a pretty dramatic childhood for him. And he says that he feels that he would have not been, and he did not end up being a very healthy person, well-rounded. He was a bit of a weirdo, but he said his childhood relationships saved him, especially with one of his close friends. So, childhood.
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind for me was, growing up in New Westminster, just right on like our next door neighbors. There was my friend Garrett that lived there, who was the same age as me, and from like 4 till 8, so it's like a significant 4 years where we shared a lot of the same interests. We always wanted to hang out. It got to this point where him and his brother were having such a close relationship with me and my brother. Maybe not as much as close relationship with my brother, because he's like 7-8 years older than both of them. But his parents and my parents decided to like cut a hole into the hedge was dividing the two houses.
Yeah.
And we would just go into each other's yards at will.
Yeah.
And like we had this really big backyard where we had a tree house and a trampoline and just like space to run. And so oftentimes we'd be like coming home safe, like from dance class for me, and they'd both be on the trampoline just jumping in our backyards. And I often found myself just like going over to their place, knocking on the back door, being like, "Is Garrett home? Can we play?" We would often be playing Pokemon together. We would be playing Nintendo. Yeah, he was always that guy where we would just like have these like wild imagination trips, and we'd like go with each other to our imagination land, and really just enjoy it. And I think we had similar mannerisms in that way too. I think we like picked off of each other as well. Yeah, it was like a really strong and lovely friendship back in childhood.
Nice.
And then around grade 2, when we were about 8 years old, they moved away to Winfield, or Lake Country, Kelowna area.
It's really interesting because, like, I remember the first day we met, we talked about, like, hung out together, we talked about this friend, and, like, because, yeah, I have family that's from Winfield. My grandma grew up there, so, yeah.
Right. He had a very significant role in my childhood, for sure. He was, like, that friend that I clung to, and I think, maybe unpacking it a little bit, I think it maybe created this attachment psychology theory or something in my mind where I tend to latch on to maybe like one or two friends in my adult life and like really just nurture those relationships. And I don't really like to branch out. Like,
Okay.
I don't like to have. I'm not like a tree with several branches. I'm like a tree with maybe like 2 or 3 branches.
So you like build strong friendships.
Yes.
In general. Yeah. And I guess like that's a big difference between you and me, because like growing up, so like I grew up, I don't want to paint it like I was out in the middle of nowhere. I was like probably a 10-minute walk away from the mall in Chilliwack. But like I also didn't have many kids living around me. I did have one friend that lived down the street, and by friend I mean girl that she stole a lot from me. And
Really?
And like I always caught her telling lies. It was weird. It was a weird friendship.
Yeah.
But and then like I also had, I don't know, I had well, your parents like cut a hole in your fence so they could just come over. Mine were very like strict about having the house nice and clean for when people came over. So if I was to invite someone over, it would be like a big, like I have to help clean the house from top to bottom. So needless to say, yeah, I didn't like, other than my mom looking after friends every once in a while, and like me going over to be babysat with people, or by people when I was really young. I didn't have many friends coming over. So like I think I made lots of friends in school, but they were never like super close friends.
Right.
So I maybe had close friends with the people that my mom were also friends with. So anyways, yeah, and I guess like I'm kind of the type of person that like I can feel close to people and I don't need to constantly be close to them.
Okay.
Like I'm the type of friend that unless you live near me and it's convenient, I may not see you or talk to you that much.
Right.
But when I do see you, it's just like, oh my God, let's pick up where we left off.
Yes.
And I don't know. I think that
I mean, I have a few relationships like that too, but I don't know. I'm definitely someone who has just like a select few that I really do choose to just nurture as much as I can.
Yeah.
Now, I'm just curious. You probably know all the terms and all all this to like break it down. So like taking my story there, how would we define that? Like, what does that sound like to you? Like in the
I don't think that's something that's really necessarily definable, because like I think it shows your values of like building relationships and not building many of them, not casting a wide net. You're like put effort into the small number of relationships that you have.
yeah.
Whereas I don't know, I guess maybe I'm changing in that way, that I'm like maybe becoming more that way, but I still like, I think it's more that I struggle to continue building a lot of my other relationships in my life. So but I mean, yeah, I don't think there's an actual term for it.
No. Okay.
And I think that's the wonderful thing that we need to, I don't know, get away from in psychology, because you don't need a term for everything. You can just have nice explanations for individual differences.
Absolutely. Right? Life is messy. Life is random.
Yeah.
And yeah, sometimes the cookie just crumbles that way.
Yeah. And yeah. And like, I guess with childhood friendships, it sounds like it was mostly the distance that made it hard for you guys to stay friends.
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
The relationship definitely changed.
Yeah.
I wouldn't really talk to him as often or see him as often. I would experiment with like writing emails to him, because emails were kind of new to us at that time. And I bought this like letter writing kit, and I'd like write letters to him, and Then like every summer we'd go visit their family, and they had this beautiful house just overlooking the Okanagan Lake, and like
Nice.
just right underneath Grey Monk Wineries. So like,
Which is the land from my great grandfather's orchard is used by Grey Monk.
oh my
Wineries.
gosh,
So yeah,
wow, the proximity is
yeah,
intense.
yeah.
But yeah, like we would still see each other and like have contact every so often. But yeah, the relationship was definitely different, and there was definitely like that need wasn't being fulfilled in that relationship anymore. So I
Yeah.
definitely needed to like branch out to something or to someone closer.
Yeah.
And that's when I found Matt.
Okay.
And Matt and I became friends in around grade 3, but we've always kind of known each other since like preschool.
Okay.
But it wasn't until like around grade 3 where our relationship kind of grew closer, and we started to really nurture and develop that relationship a bit more. And yeah, we spent more time as best friends than Garrett and I did. Sometimes I would try to nurture the relationship with Garrett by I finally had my own money and I could book my own trips. So this was definitely a lot older than childhood. But
Yeah.
I would try to go see him maybe like once a month, take a bus all the way to Kelowna, ask if he would meet me. And it kind of stopped that whole tradition when there was 1 year where I decided, or 1 month where I decided to book a ticket. And I told him when I was arriving, and he was like, yay, cool. And then I reminded him, like, okay, I'm going to be arriving this date at this time. And then he said, oh, actually, that's not good. I can't meet you at all. I don't. And I'm like, why? And he's like, I just don't want to.
Oof.
And he wouldn't really tell me why. I'm not really sure what was going on. I'm sure there's something, but
Yeah.
no matter how hard I tried to pry or ask, he just wouldn't tell me. So that really made me feel like he took the carpet underneath my feet. And he set me up with his friend that, like, I did know, and we were friendly, but it still kind of felt like I was imposing.
Yeah, like you're coming to see him.
And then he's just refusing to see me. And that was from that moment on where I was just like, something is definitely very different
Yeah.
with our relationship.
Yeah.
When I compare that with my friend Matt, we went through so much together. Almost felt like there was this unspoken contract that even though we have issues, we're going to try to figure it out, and we're there for each other. And we would actually have a very good open communication, even though we didn't realize it. It was like one of those styles of open communication that was just so casual and free. And I think at the same time I have to give props to Matt, because he's also that kind of spirit who is very good at setting boundaries, and he's like always just been so good at being like, that's not okay.
Okay. Wow.
And definitely one of those people that was probably the most influential in my life for showing me the differences in the world, and how, you know, maybe I grew up Catholic, and I grew up all this, and like I was always shown that this is how you should see the world, and then here's my best friend Matt being like, no,
There's many ways to look at it.
there's so many different
Yeah.
ways to look at the world. And yeah, I'm so grateful. I mean, it was painful sometimes having him tell me off like this, but I just knew deep down in my heart that, like, even though it's painful, it would be worse losing him,
Yeah.
right?
Now, you said that there was like open communication. Do you feel it was like, even though there were these times of tension, was it that like you felt free to like say things that would necessarily, like, I don't know, how do I describe it, like, not just be pleasantries between you two, like you could share an honest opinion that like maybe you guys didn't agree with, but you could still talk about it?
Yes and no.
Okay.
And like I think it's interesting because like we grew up just kind of having this relationship where I would say something that I personally wouldn't agree with now.
Yeah.
It would be just quite like actually quite awful.
Yeah.
Something I would say. And something that I just honestly believed in that moment. and I wouldn't feel scared to tell him.
Yeah.
But then yeah, he would respond with just this like, how dare you say that? That's actually really awful. Like, shut the F up. And I would feel just like, what?
Oh, okay.
But like, and oftentimes I would feel like, why can't you see it from my perspective? Why can't we have a nice conversation about this? And yeah, there was some moments of tension, and there was some moments of being like, I feel like I can't say anything around you sometimes, or I'm walking on eggshells around you sometimes. But I think stepping back now at the age I'm at, I would say that Matt just had this innate sense of identity and this innate sense of justice.
Okay.
That was just kind of born with him.
Yeah.
You know, like he knew who
And
he
I
was.
met him once, and I get that from him.
Right?
Like, yeah, he's an interesting guy.
Right?
Yeah.
Just like he knows who he is, and brave enough to go challenge the status quo, and you know, there's parts of me that felt really scared for him sometimes, because these were things that were just like, in my mind, just so daring, so vulnerable, so brave to do. And there's part of me that was like, maybe you should tone that down a little bit. I care about your safety. Like, I don't want people talking about you behind your back. What I realized is that was me kind of blowing out his candle, blowing out his light.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really me protecting his light. And I think that's kind of normal in relationships where maybe I don't feel as secure in my own identity. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of get that with, I look back at my parents, which family relationships, big relationship that we have. And like, I think for me coming out with them, so I'm openly gay. I would consider myself, like, my identity is more queer than gay, because I don't know, I don't think I really fit in with the gay community. I more fit in with a queer community in general. That's kind of how I view it, and I like taking back that word. I think taking back words are really great. But yeah, like I definitely, when I came out to my parents, that sort of like, I need to protect you by silencing you was definitely like a big thing, especially like mostly from my mom, which my mom's an absolute saint. I asked her to keep the secret from my dad because my dad was quite homophobic, and I didn't want to tell him while I was living in their house, because I was worried something bad would happen, mainly because like my dad, and don't you dare bleep this because I think it's important to have, but he once said that faggots don't deserve to live to me, not knowing that I was gay. And I think that was a big turning point in our relationship, and like a big time when I realized that I didn't feel safe at that point. So, but like my mom was really like, well, we have to keep this a secret from your father. Like, she agreed with it at least. But then when I wanted to go and like explore my sexuality or be a part of a queer community, that was highly criticized by my mom. Just because it was like, we're keeping this a secret from your father, and I don't know what will happen. Turns out, plot twist, when I finally tell him when I'm in my first year of university, I send him a letter, and he does a complete 180 and messages me right back by email and says, I failed to keep you safe as a parent, feeling safe as a parent, and like,
wow,
I am so sorry.
Wow. And
like that was pretty big, and like we've made a lot of progress. Again, I disagree a lot with my dad's opinions, but we've made a lot of progress. But yeah, I can sort of see that, like, other people dimming your lights.
Yes.
When like, and do you know what I think it was done out of love with my parents, because like I did live in a place that had a lot of homophobia.
Yeah.
But also I'm a pretty big dude. People were terrified of me. And it was funny. There was another Richard in my graduating class.
Yeah.
I was big smart Richard, and he was gay Richard. He did not come out until much later, which is hilarious.
Oh my goodness.
So, yeah.
Oh, wow. Gosh, yeah.
Anyways, but yeah.
That's a big story. Wow.
Yeah. And I think there was one relationship that I wanted to talk about that also had to do with me coming out.
Okay.
So I had a friend in high school, or actually we weren't even that close, but like she just was somebody that I quickly became friends with in high school. She was a friend of a friend, and when I finally told her that I was gay, she was so excited to have a gay friend, which I think that was actually like a really important thing for me, because like it was really celebrated by that friend. The only problem was she was like, I have a gay friend now, to everyone in the school.
Oh,
and meanwhile we were hanging out like a lot, so it kind of outed me like completely to the whole school.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I think like, if anything, being outed by somebody that's celebrating that they are friends with you, even though it's now looking back a little icky to have like, ooh, I have a gay friend now, you become the token. But
yes.
I don't know. We were good friends for a while, and that was a relationship that kind of faded because of these like blow-ups and walking on eggshells. And personally, I've never been good at navigating those. I feel like
the eggshells.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, I'm wondering, like, how did you navigate that with your friendship?
Well, yeah, with Matt, I don't know. I think in my heart of hearts, I just knew that if my life existed without him, it wouldn't be as valuable.
Okay.
I think maybe in a sense I gotta give credit to my relationship with Garrett.
Okay.
To the reason why I really had this like feeling about a best friendship, because, you know, Garrett and I were almost inseparable for the first like 4 or 5 years of our life. Like, we spent almost every single day together, and we just got each other back when we were kids, and respectful of each other's imaginations and each other's likes and interests. And there's something that felt very safe and very validated and very purposeful or meaningful. Yeah, the unfortunate separation did happen. People change, people grow, things happen, but in a sense, when one door closes, wow, the cliche is going to come out, but when one door closes, another one opens, and what opened up was a friendship with Matt. And I think, in a sense, I had that foundation that was lined up, and almost this like understanding of what I know I want in a friendship, and here's someone who can provide a lot of that. Yeah. Even though Matt and I are almost like very different in all of our interests. It's quite interesting. Like, oftentimes growing up, we would say like, we're two different people. Like, Matt
I remember sitting with him and we started talking about Pokemon, and then I found out that he wasn't into Pokemon. I'm like, how do you communicate with Luke?
But that's the thing, is like, I think him and I were two souls that get each other very deeply. Yeah. And we get each other in that way, just even though we have those differences. Like, he was kind of emo growing up. Like, he was listening to all the like emo bands, punk rock bands, metal bands. You know, loved black and the dark, gloomy colors.
And you're Mr. Sunshine.
I'm Mr. Sunshine, right? Like, I was the the super happy friend cheering up the depressed guy.
And I love how, like, I was the kid that dressed emo, but I was Mr. Sunshine as well. So right? I kind of had those both. Anyways.
You know, it's interesting that you kind of say that, because it makes me think of maybe how he was the darkness and I was the light, and that when we were together, I kind of reminded him of the light, and when he was with me, he reminded me of the darkness sometimes.
Okay, so we are going to bring in some psychology theory here because, like,
Let's
what
go.
you have just talked about is like three of my like favorite topics.
Let's go.
Okay, so first of all, like the whole like you had a foundational friendship that really like informed, and like that just reminds me a lot of attachment, and like so attachment theory created by Bowlby. It's the idea that like we need to form close attachments, and he really like he focused on parental attachments between child and parent and caregiver, because like really it's an evolutionary thing. Us as humans, we require to have that attachment relationship with our parents in order to survive. Because we aren't like sea turtles that like have mama has like hundreds of them, one survives and passes down. No, that's not how our species works.
No.
So really attachment is like that general sense of like what we call normative attachment, where like we get support and survival from our parents, but as we age, like that attachment system's still there. And like I think probably the best way to describe what the attachment system does as we get older, at least the way I see it, is it's an emotion regulation system. We have these, like, think of the strong relationships that you have in your life, like the ones that you are able to share deep dark things with, and like that person usually is the type of person that allows you to regulate your emotions. And like the way I see it, there's this thing called the circle of security that is used a lot, and it's the idea of like, and it's usually with parents and children, where there is a secure base and a safe haven. So if secure base is like your, oh man, I actually always mix these up. I'm probably going to mix them up, and if my supervisor ever hears this, she's going to bite my head off. But secure base is where you're about to go explore the world.
Okay.
You can use that person, like knowing that person's there for you. You can go and explore the world. And then when shit happens in your life, you can return to that friend as a safe haven. So it turns into a cycle of like, I can go explore the world, but I can always come back to this person. And I think that's the function of our relationships as we, like the close attachment relationships that we get older. And like, that's how I view how therapy works. Like a big thing that we say is that 60% of therapy is the relationship that you have with your therapist. It doesn't matter if they're a good or bad therapist as far as technique goes. Like the majority comes from the relationship, and I think that's that circle of security. They meet with me, they create that attachment with me, they feel that I give them the support to go out and explore the world, but they're able to come back to me. And it's artificial in some ways, in many ways, but it nonetheless is an attachment relationship. So I think that like that's a really important way of looking at relationships here. At least the fact that our relationships build upon each other. Because your relationship with your parents kind of helps inform how you have relationships with your friends. And then there's a cascading effect.
Interesting. Yes.
Thoughts on that so far?
Well, you know what's interesting is the first thing that I thought of when you mentioned emotion regulation is, you know, I was thinking about people with borderline personality disorder. And it's probably developed, and this is my theory, you're here to correct me, this is just my off-the-dome thought, but they probably grew up in environments where they didn't have that. Was it safe haven? Is that what you called it? The
safe haven, secure base. And actually, like, we talked about this last time, and you really liked it, the biosocial model of, and so like just to explain a little bit, like people with borderline personality disorder, one of the key symptoms is like unstable emotions. And like with the clients that I've worked with that have at least had those traits, they tend to not be able to describe their emotions. They just go, I go crazy. My emotions are big and overwhelming.
Yeah.
And that's all that they talk about.
Right.
Like, that's the level of it. And what we think of is the biosocial theory is there's two components. So the first is biological. Okay. So this is the nature component. So have you, like, I kind of know you, Luke. Like, would you say that you're the type of person to have, like, big emotions sometimes?
Oh,
like,
heck yes.
Big emotions. Are you easily set off?
No.
No? Okay.
Wait, yes and no. I would say I have, it depends. Contextually speaking,
Yeah.
sometimes I'm quite good
Yeah.
at regulating those emotions. And if in, let's say, the context of certain topics or certain people, I can have my moments of just like, blah.
Yeah. And then another component of this is, like, do your emotions last long term?
Some do, yes. Okay. I would say for me, my ability to feel empathy can last for a really long time, and it can actually be a little bit crippling.
Now, empathy is not necessarily emotion, but are you meaning like you feel the other person's emotion a little bit?
Yes, okay. Yes. That experience that you're talking about, yes, yeah. The mirroring or the absorption of the emotion, I can feel it for quite a long time sometimes. And I think I was trying to read it. There's like the state and trait. Mm-hmm. A lot of psychologists are still trying to debate the difference between the two words.
In relation to
like emotions, like the difference between like experiencing anxiety versus having generalized anxiety disorder. Yeah. Right? Where I think a state is where you experience it, but it's not
it's the motion of the ocean.
Yeah, yes? Yeah, or it doesn't last too long, right? Whereas, like, trait, it lasts for a little too long and you're kind of, like, stuck in that tunnel.
Yeah, it's kind of like, the way I see it is, like, state is, like, I'm constantly going, like, here. But, like, if my...
Going up and down with your finger?
Yeah, going up and down with my... this is a wonderful audio medium, I guess. Okay. So you're going up and down a little bit. But, like, you've got an average.
Okay,
that's going on. Like, is that average what we'd consider average for the average person? Or is that average a little bit higher? Or lower, of course. That's always an possibility. But
true, yes.
And, like, for me, I'm personally, like, a very, like, I'm kind of quick to go into my emotions, but they usually stay not too extreme, and they don't last too long. But I definitely am, like, I'm a crier. I cry in, like, with my clients a lot, even when they're not. And it's, like, not necessarily something that I want to control, because I think that's making me an authentic therapist. But anyways, so, like, there's that one, the biological component is that, just like our trait ability to regulate emotions.
Yeah. And
then we have the social, so that's social component, is our environment. And sometimes we're put in an environment that doesn't necessarily allow us to experience those emotions. So, like, we're told maybe that our emotions are too big. We shouldn't be that emotional. And so the theory around this, and I think it's been updated a bit recently, but I just like explaining it this way because it's like a really nice explanation, is if you get emotional and you have a parent that goes, stop crying, come on, geez, why are you being such a crybaby?
Yeah. Or
what have you. They may be well-meaning, but what that's telling you is that your emotions aren't really valid.
100%.
Yeah. And so what happens is that does that usually make you feel better when somebody's like, you shouldn't have these emotions?
No.
It really doesn't.
No, I think that's like a direct line to, like, pathologization. I don't know if I said that right, but it's like, you're abnormal. You're, like, sick. Anyways.
Do you know what, like, saying, like, I think, like, it's okay to say, you know, wow, your emotions are really big considering what's going on, because that actually can sometimes put things into perspective. I like to think of all emotions are understandable. There's always that kernel of truth, but they're not always justifiable. So, like, I think, and that's what I really worked with the clients that I had that had this issue, was, like, talking about, like, you know, it's okay to have these emotions, but let's see where it comes from and let's check the facts on it to see if it actually is worth it. And like, it's not that I want you to go, oh, I shouldn't have this emotion then. What I want you to do is go, oh, I'm having this emotion because of this, and I'm realizing that it's a bit bigger than I think it should be. And like, how am I going to help myself regulate throughout this? But what happens when like you're in an environment that's constantly saying that that's not right is like, and if you're an emotional person, you're going to up the ante probably. This is probably not going to feel good. You're probably eventually going to start saying, I'm just broken. And it like kind of gets to the point where you start being more emotional. Either your environment either helps you at that point and you learn, ooh, I always have to up the ante in order to do this, or they react poorly and like try and break it down. But does that help? No. And that's how we see that both of these, like the biological and the social aspect, like really build upon each other and get out of control.
Wow. Yes, I remember you telling me this and it just blew my mind.
Yeah.
And this is kind of like how you defined insecurity, right?
No.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Insecurity, there's so when we talk about insecurity in the term of attachment,
okay,
that we kind of measure it now on an axis of 2 scales. So there's attachment anxiety, which is like, I guess like the behavior wise, it's like, are you worried that your partner is going to leave you? Are you worried that you are unlovable in some way and you really need to? And so what we see with people, like it's, we call it a working model of the self, saying that I'm unlovable, therefore if I have a partner, and I'm talking about this more in a romantic relationship because that's where I'm mostly familiar with it, but you sink your claws into your partner a bit more because you're worried about them leaving. Because you're worried about you not being able to secure a partner in the future. So gotta protect your baby. And then so that you can either be high in that or low in that.
Right.
Then there is attachment avoidance, which is this idea of, are other people trustworthy? The working model of other. So can I have really emotional conversations about things that are important to me, that are like revealing about myself? Can I have those with people without getting hurt?
Yeah.
And so if you go, no, I have to be an absolute closed book. I can't really like have big emotions with people. I like just have to keep everyone at an arm's reach. Yeah. That's high attachment avoidance. So if you're low on both of them, then you're what you call secure. And we all fall along continuum. It's not yes or no. But like when you get higher on both, we call that fearful attachment. And that's that type of attachment is where you're more likely to give silent treatment. Walk out on people, because like not only are you thinking that you're not worth it, you probably want to keep that relationship. So you may not actively be like, oh, you got to stay with me, but you're also worried about the other person, how trustworthy they are. So anyways, that's insecurity. That's how we conceptualize insecurity now.
How is it?
Yeah.
Oh shoot.
And I mean, like, that's just one theory around it. Like, I'm sure there's other views, but this is the most prominent one in attachment. I wanted to get into that attachment bit, but do you mind if I share like my 2 other theories that I think are really important to what you said? I know I feel this needs to be a 2-parter, to be honest.
Every single podcast I've done is probably a 2-parter right now.
Good.
I saved like 2 hours.
Good.
Just so we could do this. Yeah. So it's fine. Keep going. Cool. Like, tell me more.
So then you mentioned the idea that you guys were so opposite and you were brought into each other, like his lifestyle and things that you weren't necessarily into, you experienced them through him.
Yes.
And so this is the idea of self-expansion. And this is another big thing. Again, this is coming more from the relationship research, but I can see it really applying to friends and stuff like that as well. Because a lot of the research around attraction and stuff has been like, we are more attracted to people that are similar to us in many ways, because we know that that's a done deal. If there's somebody really similar to you and you're interested in them, we're more likely to be attracted because we're just like, they're just like me. It's going to be easy. But the one thing that's going to get in the way of this is, well, not necessarily in the way of this. We want something interesting.
Yes.
And we want to learn something new. We want to get new resources from our partners. So this is the idea of self-expansion.
Okay.
The people that we have and the relationships that we have in our life allows us to expand our sense of self.
Yeah.
So I really found this in my first, God, I'm going to say my first real relationship, but the hilarious thing is at the end of our relationship, he was like, no, we aren't dating.
Oh.
So that was, ooh. But,
oh, geez.
He's my Matt. I feel everyone has a Matt, whether good or bad.
I've got a cousin Matt.
Okay.
Yeah.
But my Matt, I really was attracted to him because we were so different.
Mm.
Like, I'm Mr. Sunshine. He was moody and assertive. Mm. And I was agreeable and happy. He really was interested in the arts and stuff like that. And I was interested, but I didn't really know about it. He loved going to coffee shops to work. And I kind of did that before, but never saw it as like an actual activity. So like a lot of the things that we did together have actually become part of my personality.
Interesting.
The way that we interact with our partners or friends, we get what they have in a way. And so their self becomes integrated with our self in some way.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely say like my love of Green Day came from Matt. I think also just like my love of being weird.
Okay.
That was something that we shared together, was like we love just being weird with each other. And we were definitely those millennials that were like, ooh, so random. Let's be random together.
Oh, no.
Yes, I know. Cringy. However, I think we just kind of really loved just like, just being weird with each other, being silly with each other. I picked up on a lot of the goofiness that he would do. And then I think vice versa. Lots of inside jokes as well that I think have just kind of like woven themselves into our psyches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I mean, the one thing with self-expansion is eventually as you like stop learning novel things from like either your partner or your friendship, it's gonna lose that self-expansion. So like, have you ever had like a brand new friend doing a bunch of new stuff with them and you're really excited to be their friend, and then all of a sudden you stop doing new things together and it's kind of like
oh yes,
not feeling as interesting? That's when self-expansion starts to peter out. So one of the things that we give advice for couples is keep doing new stuff together, learn things together, like doing a class together on something. That's actually the thing that's going to make a relationship. Like, if everything else is cool in the relationship but it's getting boring and you're worried about that, doing like learning something new together is like a perfect way to spice up the relationship.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
So you always need to be expanding yourself, whether it's with your partner or without your partner. But yeah,
I feel like it's a weird repeated pattern that sometimes happens in my friendships, but like I have a strong friendship and then they move away. Mm-hmm. And I have another strong friendship that filled it, and then they move away. Mm-hmm. I think since then I've had a lot of other really strong friendships. I had a very strong relationship with my cousins. Mm-hmm. I had another friendship for a while that was very much what you're talking about, like where things were new. He was a different friend, where we tried a lot of new things together, and then it just kind of like petered out. Mm-hmm. But weirdly enough, a lot of the relationships after Matt moving away to Montreal they kind of just ended in like a violent, not really violent. Let me choose a different word. It just kind of felt emotionally violent. It was just kind of messy. It always kind of ended.
Messy. Yeah.
Not really ended. I wouldn't say all of them ended, but
yeah.
The shift in the dynamic of the relationship was just messy.
Got toxic.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel, yeah, friendships end in those two ways. They either, well, I think three ways. You either drift apart, but you're able to, like, just rekindle every once in a while, and that's still a good relationship.
Yeah.
Or you move apart and just, like, kind of never see each other again. Or it's, like, one of those, oh my god, that was some drama
Yes.
ending the friendship. And thank God I haven't had many of those in my life. But then again, I don't know if any of the ones that have felt like they have been slowly disappearing, whether that for me was actually maybe trauma on their end. I guess you never know, because it may not be something that's shared with you.
Yeah. Ooh.
But yeah, so about friendships and relationships ending, I guess, how do you feel about those ones that have kind of ended?
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, I've never had a romantic relationship in my life, and there's a part of me that feels abnormal by it, but I don't think that comes from me. I think it comes from the outside world telling me that it's abnormal. But when I listen to songs about heartbreak, I relate, even though it's not romantic that I'm relating to. It's more like platonic friendship that I'm relating to. Because, like, yeah, I know what heartbreak feels like. It is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And it is devastating. And there is grief. And there is mourning. And, you know, the whole cycle and mess of grief. But when I think about it now, as time has passed and the dust has settled and the story is made more clear through counseling, therapy, and inner work, I look on it with like a bittersweet gratitude.
I like that.
Right? Because it's just like, yeah, that sucked.
Yeah.
That really did suck. You know, there's one friend in particular where I think, like, yeah, that ended in a really shitty way.
Yeah.
But then I think about how I was holding on to parts of myself, secrets about myself for such a long time. And because he was this new friend, I was like, what the hell? And I just told him. And it, like, blew open my heart and blew open my psyche when I did. And I was like, I wasn't ready for that, but I did it. And there was a closeness because of it. And there was, I think, a resilience that started getting built up. I was talking about this with my cousin Sarah, actually. I kind of liked how we were describing resilience. It's kind of like a booster shot sometimes. Like, to properly build resilience, a lot of times society uses the word resilience as, like, you need to be resilient, like, as it's like a shield. You just put up your armor and that's your resilience. But in truth, resilience is actually the opposite, where it's you gotta take down the shield and feel
You're taking the punches,
right? And you gotta take the punches, and it's kind of like every time you take a punch and you feel it and you let yourself experience it, you're building up the immunity and the skill set to properly go through it the next time, if that makes any sense.
No, it completely, because, like, it sounds like you just become more mindful rather than being, like, unbelievably guarded and pretending like it isn't happening.
Yes.
You are more taking it in and realizing it for what it is.
Yeah.
And, like, actually, like, it's kind of, so I do a lot of mindfulness work with people, and, like, actually, I guess this isn't really related to, well, it kind of is. So for anxiety treatment, one thing that we do is we do this thing called, actually with any emotion, you can do opposite action. I like doing it for anxiety. It's really easy to explain. The idea is, like, you have to do the thing that you're really scared of in anxiety treatment. The reason why I like framing it as an opposite action is, like, we tell people to do opposite action all the way. So if I have a client that's afraid to go, like, has social anxiety and doesn't want to go to a party, I could say, go to the party. And what they could do is they could go to the party and they could go play with the cat in the corner.
Yeah.
What the fuck did they learn? Sorry, you can bleep that one. No, what the fuck did they learn from...
There's no bleeps.
There's no bleeps. Okay, oh no. What can they learn from being in that party if they just go play with a cat. And so the idea here is to just be like very mindful and present and like actually fully opposite act all the way. Talk to people. Notice what happens when you are interacting with people. Notice their facial expressions. If somebody's anxious, they're more likely to interpret neutral things as negative.
Oh.
But even that is great because you can be like, oh, you thought that they looked like they just like really didn't like you? Well, what happened? Oh, so no one died. Okay, that's great. And then you kind of build off of that, which is wonderful. But yeah, so like the idea of like being resilient is being mindful of your experience. And I think that's really powerful.
Wow. What was interesting is, it's kind of tying me back to what you're talking about when, your first foundational relationship is your parents. Mm-hmm. And when you grow up in an environment where they see your big emotions and then deny not the existence, but like tell you that you shouldn't be feeling like that. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the shield of resilience.
Yeah.
It kind of just starts at your parents, doesn't it?
Well, notice how I said the clients that have trouble with this can't describe their emotions.
Yes.
That's the shield. That's the let's just paint it all one color and not understand where it's coming from because it's obviously bad.
Yeah.
And so the big step that you do with clients and I'm talking specifically about DBT, like I think the thing that is the powerful medicine with that is you allow them to be mindful of their emotions, mindful of what it looks like, mindful of where it comes from.
Yeah.
And then so we do a thing called chaining. And we have them do a diary card every single week where they like rate their emotions every single day. It's a very tough therapy. Like,
oof, yeah.
DBT is like you are doing an hour with your therapist. You're doing 2 hours a week of group treatment. You are doing homework from both your therapist and your group. Like you are going all in. And part of the homework from the therapist is doing this diary card. What we do is we go look and we're like, oh, where were the emotions big this week? Or where were they small? And like, let's see what was happening there. And we do what's called a chain. And we understand, okay, either this big emotion happened, and usually the emotion's leading to some sort of negative or some sort of target behavior. Mm-hmm. So whether that be self-harm, whether that be drinking, whether that be doing drugs, there's tons of different examples. But we go, okay, you did your target behavior. What was going on? Let's go backwards. Let's like create a complete story of how you got to the target behavior.
Wow.
And as we do that, we kind of see like, ooh, so you didn't sleep last night. And then you got up and then you had a fight with your partner. Then you went to work and then you see like everything. You felt this in your body. You were feeling sad and angry. Well, where was that coming from? Oh, it sounds like the next thing was shame that came up afterwards or something like that. And so this is what an average therapy session is digging into a single event, going in and finding the structure of what led to that. Wow. And then when we have that beautiful structure, we go in and go, okay, here's at this point something you could have done that would have changed the trajectory. And that's how we do it. And I remember it was one of my last sessions with one of my clients, and I sat down and I was like, oh, I noticed this thing on your diary. And they went through the whole chain by themselves, unprompted. And then they were like, and these are the things I'm changing in order to do it. And I was like, you just did that by yourself.
Wow.
And they were like, yeah, I know how to manage my emotions now. So like it's like, wow. Again, it's that mindfulness of the actual emotion can be really helpful.
Yeah. And so when you say mindfulness specifically, could it be like just more so just naming the emotion, or trying to at least name one emotion? Sometimes I remember going through like one of my first counseling appointments back when I was like 15 or something. Yeah. And so the counselor is like, so how are you feeling today? And I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And then I tried to describe, like, I don't know, there's this scene in The Simpsons where, like, Mr. Burns apparently has every disease ever, and the doctor tries to describe it by like using these little finger trolls,
Yeah.
and then like this little toy doorway, and he tries to shove all of them through the doorway,
Yeah.
and none of them fit through the doorway. And I'm like, that's kind of where I'm at.
The emotions. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And they're like, oh, okay. So then what they started doing is like, I guess chaining.
Yeah.
In a sense, that's what they were doing, is they're trying to like, so like take me through the day.
Yeah.
And then I would describe an event, and then they're like, so could it be perchance that you felt this emotion at this point? And then that was like, that's one goblin out of the doorway.
Yeah.
And there's like, could it be possible that you felt this emotion during this event? That's another goblin out of the doorway, right? And so now finally I have this like inventory of all these emotions that I felt in one day, which was
a lot.
And right?
Yeah, and that's what we try and like highlight, is that like it's not a simple thing. Like if you were able to, like, if it was easy and emotions, and some people are like this where it's just like, I'm happy, I'm sad, like it's one or the other and it's fine. But a lot of people are not like that, and it's like emotions are so complicated. And like, so we're actually getting into our original topic that I was gonna like, I had suggested, is of emotions. But like I really love the idea of primary and secondary emotions, because like that usually is a good way of looking at it. And so primary emotions is the thing that you feel right away.
Yeah.
Primary emotions, generally they are the softer emotions, though I fight some psychologists that say that like anger is not usually a primary emotion, because I get angry about that, because that's my primary emotion. But like your primary emotion is usually the one that's solvable, the one that's fixable, and the one that like you should actually be paying attention to.
Yeah.
Generally, the secondary emotion that comes up afterwards is usually trying to save you from that primary emotion. And
what do you mean by that?
So, for example,
I think I know what you mean by that, but like, yeah.
So, for example, somebody, let's say, romantic relationship, your partner says something that's really, really hurts you. You feel that hurt right away. But maybe you don't actually express that hurt. Maybe you jump right to yelling at them.
Oh, yes.
Because, like, that is, like, you are on the defensive. And, like, you know...
Is it hot in here?
No. And so, like, that could be... You could be jumping to your secondary emotion, which the secondary emotion is not going to fix that hurt. It's just going to create more distance between you and that other person.
Right.
It's going to help you by not feeling hurt, because being hurt is to be vulnerable.
Fuck.
So, like, you really, like, sometimes you don't even feel that hurt. You just jump to that anger. And that's why sometimes secondary emotions, everyone's saying it's always anger. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes somebody just pisses you off and you get angry first. And yes. I think that's legitimate to say that it can be a primary, but often it is a secondary. So the thing is, like, usually the primary emotion is the one that you actually should be focusing on and working with. The secondary one usually either leads you to do crappy things sometimes. So sometimes that can be rumination about things. So if you go from being hurt to feeling hopeless, that's another primary. You can be hurt by something or feel sad about something. And sadness, I guess, like, when you feel sad, like, actually feel sad, not the hopeless part. What is your instinct to do when you're sad?
Yeah, when I'm sad, I know physically my shoulders roll forward, my head falls down.
Nice describe.
Yes. Yeah, the emotion is quite, like, prominent in my psyche. It's like it's the only thing I can really think about, and it's hard for me to deviate sometimes.
Now, like, I'm wondering, what is, like, the urge that you have when you feel sad?
Well, I think something that's interesting about me, and I can relate to when you said you were a crier. I was always a crier.
Yeah.
Growing up as well. I think for me, I had this innate sense of let me feel. if that makes any sense. And when I did grow up with like my parents telling me, stop crying, don't be angry, stop this, stop with my emotions. It wasn't all the time, but when it came to sadness, there's nothing that they could do to stop me from being sad. And I think in a sense it created this resilience in me about sadness, where I'm able to sit with my sadness in a very healthy way. And some of my best days, like the most joyful days, have some deep sorrow in them as well.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like I will watch like a TV show that will literally make me sob and make me sit with the fact that life is just a piece of shit sometimes. And then I'll go out and I'll go connect with some people that will make me smile.
This is what I was trying to lead to, but like you when you feel sad, you want that connection, don't you?
Oh, 100%. Yes. And like I tend to like flip the lights off in my room.
Yeah.
I sit here in this chair and I'll listen to sad music, and I think in a sense like I'm definitely a melancholy kind of guy.
Okay.
Which is interesting because like I was always describing myself even earlier in this conversation as the happy-go-lucky guy, but I think the reason why I was so genuinely happy-go-lucky is because at the other end of the spectrum, I just really allowed myself to be sad.
Okay, yeah. I like how you're describing it as like sadness can be just sadness by itself. And like, I think like sadness's ugly brother is hopelessness.
Oof.
And that like... And I'm sure, like, what you described to me does not sound like hopelessness. It sounds like you cry your eyes out, but then you're able to, like, you're like, I need to be picked up by somebody else in my life, so I need to go out and see them.
I mean, I've had moments of hopelessness, too, though. Like, I've gotten stuck in hopelessness, but that's usually tied to self-worthiness.
Okay, yeah. So maybe some shame mixed in with there.
100%, yeah.
But when you're feeling that hopelessness, what's the urge?
To fix myself, interestingly enough. Like, I am desperate for a solution.
Okay,
when I'm feeling hopeless, and I can't figure out any solution.
So it sounds to me like there's rumination in that, right?
Rumination, lack of self-compassion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really makes me think of this work that I'm doing with the archetypes that's inspired by Carl Jung. The book that I'm reading is called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. But when I was doing the work on the warrior, I recognized that there was a crap ton of shame.
Yeah.
When doing the work with the coach that I was doing it with, I had to show up to every session without a shirt on.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
Right? And I was like, no, what? And he, like, the thing is, my coach made me feel very safe.
Things that you could not do with your psychologist.
No, absolutely. And I think there's some beauty in, like, shop around for what works for you as well,
fair,
right?
Fair, yeah.
And, like, maybe have a whole bunch of different options for your self-care, right? But what was really interesting is, like, he made me feel safe. Yeah. But I didn't feel safe in my own skin. Yeah. Which was very interesting. And then discovering the shadows of the warrior. So at the top of the triangle of the warrior is the healthy warrior, who's the one who protects your inner kingdom. And then off to the left side of the triangle, you have the active shadow, who is known as the sadist in this type of language. And he's the one who is would protect the kingdom, but like would do so without caring about how much harm he does to others. Lashing out. Yeah. And then on the other side is the passive shadow, which is the masochist. And I was allowed to do a lot of creativity with it, and I just started to imagine this masochist in my psyche, and it turns out she's a woman. Because I have a lot of similarities to how females typically would hate themselves in a way too. I have like a similar shame response. She was amorphous and like scary and goblin-like, and she almost looked like a Titan from Attack on Titan.
Okay.
But she had these fingers that would like stretch into strings, and she would weave them into the other shadows of my other psyches, and she would use them to do her bidding, essentially. So my masochist would use my magician shadow as a way to self-harm mentally. Both of my lover shadows, like I think there's a huge reason why I don't have romantic relationships. It's because it all kind of boils down to this masochist shadow, where deep down it's kind of hate myself sometimes, right? And there is a lot of shame. What were we talking about?
We were talking about like secondary emotions, and I think that's a beautiful description of a lot of what Jung was talking about. Probably has to do with like our secondary emotion responses, like especially the shadows. But like when we're talking about hopelessness, most people when they're hopeless tend to like withdraw.
Yes.
And that's like the natural tendency. For shame, it's kind of similar in the way that like you want to hide a certain aspect of yourself from the shameful aspect of yourself from others.
This is why the masochist came up, because those are all aspects of like
100%
secretly kind of hating yourself.
Yeah.
What I really love about this type of work, though, is that it kind of creates this language to help separate you from my emotional experience or my problems. Yeah. It's a very flowery and creative and almost kind of like this medieval kind of language, but like I will take it and I'm going to run with it.
Well, like I think one of the key things in ACT therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, is that externalization of these things. Like you're not necessarily, and I guess I'm doing OCD treatment a lot now, and one of the things I'm learning about is like you want to externalize those thoughts that you're having, because like, and if we look at like there's this idea of moral scrupulosity, OCD. It's like the feeling that you have to be perfect to other people and you have to like do the right thing constantly. And so those in that OCD, sometimes it can be like, even if I think something that's unsavory, they like that makes them a bad person.
Oof.
And so
do I have some of that? Maybe.
I honestly, I was listening to the podcast and I was thinking, is this no? I think everyone has a different level of this, but like a big part of the treatment for that is like, and from what I understand, I'm just starting in this treatment. DBT, I think I'm like pretty good at, but I'm just starting to learn this. But a part of it is externalizing those thoughts and like being like, these are just thoughts.
Yes.
You don't have to. It doesn't have to be a part of me.
Yes.
So,
and like the best way to put that idea that you just said, that these are just thoughts, into action is your language, the words that you say, right? I think that's been like this past few years, that's been the most mind-blowing thing. Yeah. Is like taking inventory of the language, of the words that you're saying out loud into yourself. Yeah. And how they affect your psychology. I just double checking, like, is this like going from this is this way to, oh, I'm worried or I had a thought that this is this way. Yes. Yeah. Right? Like we're just like breaking down the linguistics of your internal monologue or external monologue. Yeah. Right? Like for the archetypal work that I'm doing, what's really lovely about having this language is that I can talk about my problems as if they are anthropomorphic versions of themselves that are completely different entities. Yeah. And like linguistically speaking, my masochistic shadow really loves to convince me that I hate myself. Yeah. Right? As opposed to me saying I hate myself. Right? Break down those linguistics. Yeah. This is causing me to do this. I'm like literally driving a wedge between me and my problems. And I am recognizing that I can hold on to many problems, but that doesn't have to define me. Yeah. Right? And I think almost like shame dissolving techniques in this work right now, if that makes any sense. Like shame linguistically is like saying that I am insert identity here.
Yeah.
Right? I am bad. I am unlovable. I am whatever, right? And that's essentially saying that I am 100% of me is this thing. Whereas if you were to use your words to create some separation, you're then saying that you're just experiencing this as opposed to being it.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think that brings up a key component of what we teach in mindfulness is to be non-judgmental. It sounds like when I first introduce it to clients, they're like, well, I'm just judgmental. Like there's like, that's how it's going to be. It actually, the best way to prevent yourself from being non-judgmental is to realize, like, think of what you had just said, like your self-talk that you're giving to yourself, and ask yourself if there's a more accurate way that you can describe it. So this can go from I am unlovable to I think I'm unlovable to there are aspects of my body that I don't like, which makes me think I'm unlovable.
Oof.
To I've been told throughout my life that this aspect of my body is not right. Then I internalize that. You can actually just like, as you describe something and make it clearer, that rips away a lot of that judgment.
Wow.
That's in on that. I say, like, when in doubt, describe it out is like one
that.
thing that I use a lot. And like, I think the one thing that you got to watch out for is that leading just to rumination, which I think is like, that's the big thing that usually comes with a secondary emotion.
So what is rumination?
Rumination,
to be more specific.
Yeah. So, okay, it comes from this idea of, cows are ruminators. They eat grass, they chew it up, it goes to their one stomach, then they vomit it out.
Yuck.
And then they chew it and it goes into another stomach and then they digest it.
Oh, okay.
That's what you're doing with your, usually thoughts. It's more of a thought focused thing.
Okay.
And I think this, when you were talking about like trying to fix something, that sounds like rumination to me, because like it's like, I do this too. I like go from just trying to think that there is a solution to an emotion. And there very rarely are like solutions to emotions. We just have to experience them, and we can create other things. But like the why,
yes.
that is like, that leads to rumination, and it's also not accepting reality a lot of times. Which, yeah.
It really makes me feel like rumination and foreboding joy are almost the same thing.
Describe foreboding joy for me again.
Foreboding joy is like, life's going well, relationships going well, school's going well. Fuck. When's the bomb gonna go off, right? And I think that moment you say, fuck, when's the bomb gonna go off? When's the shoe gonna drop? Is almost like the spark of what could be anxiety, rumination, dread.
Yeah, I don't think rumination is always that, but it definitely, like, you are ruminating when you get into that point.
Yes.
And, like, yeah, you're trying to solve an unanswerable thing.
Yes.
What I would say, an attachment to the way things currently are. I'm not saying the attachment in the sense of what I talked about earlier. That attachment is more of a, like, Buddhist idea of attachment, where you're holding on to things.
Right.
That's when you're like, oh my god, what if this wonderful thing ends? And like that gets in the way of you enjoying the thing in the moment.
Oh.
Like, and so like we gotta let go and allow things to be as they are in the moment. And if you do lose that thing, that's very sad, and like you gotta accept that like you are losing something that's really important. But that really reminds me of going to go see my friend Garrett for like the first time in Kelowna when he moved away, and being so excited. That trip, that 4-hour drive all the way to Kelowna was just like, oh my god, yes, we get to go see him. We're gonna go do this, we're gonna do that, we're gonna do this and that and that and this and this and that, and then we're finally there, and it's just like we're having so much fun. And it was just a weekend. Yeah.
Maybe like 3 days.
Yeah.
Right? And we're like having so much fun on Friday, all this excitement, and then Saturday is just like, that's like acceptance of like, okay, this is what it's like. What are we gonna do now?
Yeah.
And it's not really as extravagant as my mind played it out to be. And then the last day hits, and I can't help but cry uncontrollably. And I don't want to accept the fact that like we're leaving and that all of this is done, and there's like this disappointment.
Yeah.
Right? That's devastating.
But like you can feel that, but also like crying and like really focusing on it being you losing it. You lost a day.
Yeah, I did lose a day. The value of goodbyes are hard sometimes.
Yeah.
And that just because you do have to say goodbye doesn't mean you should have to ruin the last day. You know what I mean? And I think it's really important to recognize and reaffirm and solidify to all of your relationships, to like your whole life essentially, that goodbyes are going to happen and that they are so hard.
Yeah.
And to build up that resistance, to ruminate about holding on,
Yeah.
is only making it worse.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think like this brings up a really good point of like the happiness that you can experience from going and seeing a friend that you miss, to the goodbyes. Like a lot of people really struggle with something like that. Oh, obviously going to visit him is a bad thing because I felt sad at the end. But that's not the full story. And this is where like, so DBT is dialectical behavior therapy. And a dialectic is the idea, it's a philosophy that two things can be right at one time.
Oh no.
Yeah. So like
what?
Like two things that can be opposites, like they both can coexist with each other. So like a lot of people have a hard time seeing that and like navigating that, because like it is tough. Like there are conundrums. How can I feel like so happy seeing my friend and then feeling so horrible leaving them?
Wait, so what you're saying is that when I agree to go see my friend,
Yeah.
there is a contract that I'm unknowingly signing that is going to be both amazing and like really, really depressing.
Yeah.
At the exact same time.
I don't think like that's necessarily a contract. I think it's like a lot of what we do in life has these dialectics, and we have to look at the dialectical tension. Is there something to figure out? Not really, but just respecting the fact that two things can be true at once that seem opposite.
Do you think the resistance is vulnerability, right?
What do you mean in that sense?
Like, accepting the fact that maybe the other side could also be true is now cracking open your defenses about what you thought was true?
I think so. I think like it also is just hard to stomach that there's a lot of middle paths in our life. Like, and like that DBT is deeply rooted in Buddhist tradition. Like that's actually where a lot of it's stolen from. Everything in DBT is stolen, as Marsha would say. By the way, she's a hilarious woman, and I've heard that her health has really taken a turn, and she's very far into dementia.
Oh, jeez.
Which is very sad, but sassy bitch. And I, like, just the stories I hear are just like kind of terrifying at some points. But she said she stole everything from that therapy, and a lot of it's stolen from Buddhist tradition.
Hey,
and like
that's fine.
This dialectical tradition of like two things being true at once. Watch out for these dialectics, because like I think that's a really important thing to notice, because when we try and force something to not be dialectical when it is ultimately dialectical, like you can run into problems. If you had just, and it sounds like you kind of went to the full camp of this sucks because I have to leave my friend.
Yeah, I was like in hysterics.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't actually like hold on to a steady breathing pattern.
Yeah.
It was like that classic like
and do you blame me? Like you're a kid with poor emotion, right? Kids are really bad at reading their emotions. Let's state the facts there.
Yeah.
I think now you're probably the type to be able to see that dialectic maybe a bit more. Like,
oh, absolutely.
I'm really sad, but I really want to enjoy this time together. I'm seeing one of my friends tomorrow that's gone away on internship, and I am just so excited to see her. But it's going to be really sad for me to like see her and then say goodbye again. Dialectic tensions that we have to kind of consolidate.
Wow.
But yeah, watch out for those. Like I think that's one really important thing is like, again, this gets into like the idea of black and white thinking. We get stuck in those patterns, but it's usually some sort of shade of gray.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Interesting. No, I'm just like, I'm having a creative thought. Work with me. But, you know, just today I was exposed to YouTube, the shorts.
Mm-hmm.
It's like TikTok, but on YouTube.
Yeah.
And for some reason, YouTube thinks that it's going to be okay to show me these TikToks
Mm-hmm.
that are trying to argue against the idea of non-binary gender.
Okay.
And it gets really painful for me to watch that sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost like gender could be like a dialectic construct. Correct me.
Yep.
But
No,
like,
I can see.
You know, like nature doesn't work in binaries,
Mm-hmm.
usually.
Yeah.
There's rarely, I can't even actually think of a time where nature actually works in binaries.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the light is on, the light is off.
Well, like, no, well,
I don't know.
If we're thinking like sunsets, like there's different levels of light. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? And like gender is another construct
Mm-hmm.
that is not binary.
Yeah, we get to false dichotomies of
Right?
things.
Like my masochistic shadow is a female,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that's a part of me that I can recognize that I have some femininity in.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, this is gonna like kind of really open up the conversation, but this is why I think like, so Myers-Briggs is based off of Jung's work.
Oh yes.
And I think what you're seeing probably is like there's a lot of complexity to Jung's work, and like,
Oh yes.
and like it's not that you are, I am a masochistic knight. Like it's like there's no like I am this. There are different parts to you.
Oh yes.
And so like I think like Myers-Briggs is really trying to force a dichotomy on those ideas,
Mm-hmm.
when in reality there's many different levels of it.
I mean, there's generosity in the whole Myers-Briggs test, but I think you need to take it with a grain of salt and maybe just put it into the spectrum of who you are.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Don't let it be your personality type.
Don't let it just be your personality type. It can just be like, hey, I took the test and this is what I scored.
Do you know how many times I've taken it and it's come out different?
Oh, really? I've only taken it once.
Oh, yeah. I like every single time. I don't remember it because, yeah, to be honest, not the best validity as somebody who does psychological testing and stuff like that. It's not great. But
okay, that's good to know.
I think it's good like just to get the conversation going in your head. Again, like these are like different ways that you're exploring yourself and you're learning to describe yourself more. Which again, like it's kind of like, I don't know, if you're just leaving it at the Myers-Briggs level, that's probably not going to be really helpful because that's not really expanding and describing yourself. But I think like it can be a tool to help you start to describe yourself a bit more.
Interesting. Alrighty there. Well, there's the first part of that conversation. It's a long one. Yeah, I think the next part will be a bit shorter. In the next part, however, I do talk about boundaries with Richard, and it is a very, very good conversation. And I do get a little bit personal in that conversation. I do talk about a conflict that I had, but without giving away too much. The conflict is resolved, and everything is okay now. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next episode. But yeah, I hope there is something that you could take away from this conversation. I know that there's a lot that I can take away from this conversation. And yeah, I just wanted to extend a big thanks to Richard for being on the podcast, and I'd love to have you back on again one day. But yeah, I will see you in the next episode. Bye. The Dear Brambling Podcast is a podcast dedicated to my little nephew, to the next generation of humans growing up in this world, as well as to those who might be looking for a little more guidance in their life. It is hosted by me, Luc Benoit. The editing and sound design are provided by MB Productions as well as Hideout Productions. The music that you're listening to is called Sunlight Cascading Through the Clouds by Artificial Music. If you'd like to follow me on any social media, I am on Instagram and Twitch at Lucatronosaurus Rex. And for those who are still listening this far into the podcast, I'd like to take a moment to really thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'd also like to say that if you are experiencing any difficulties or pain in your life right now, there is still no substitute for a trained coach, counselor, or licensed therapist. If you are committed to putting in the work and really trying to better yourself as a human, I definitely recommend that you go searching and shopping for the right coach, counselor, or therapist for you.